Great to be with you guys again. Welcome to Seacoast Church. I'm excited about our service this weekend. We're continuing a series that we've been in called So Will I, and really focusing on worship. What does it mean to worship? And we're in week 4. Next week we'll finish up the series. Pastor Darren Patrick, who you guys have met recently, has been part of our teaching team, will be with us next weekend. But I'm excited about this week, and I'm going to set it up for you in a minute. But I want to just disclaimer. Me personally, I'm about 24 hours back, not even 24 hours back from Israel. So went to Israel with about, I see some of our Israel friends here, the Kirkpatricks, but we had a great trip. Had about 50 people that went, and just had an incredible time. And so bit jet lagged, who knows what we'll say, but it'll be fun as we do it together. But one thing that happened, and we'll, I'm sure, talk and debrief Israel with you guys more in the coming weeks, but one of the things that we did is the guide that we go with, Mark Turnage. We've been with him every single year. A couple of years ago, he started to tell me that he was pretty sure he had an idea of where one of the ancient cities that has yet to be discovered is in Israel. It's called Bethsaida. If you're reading your Bible in the New Testament, it's the hometown of Andrew and Peter, and he calls it Beit Saida because he shows off. He says that's like a Hebrew way to say it or whatever, but it's Bethsaida. And so he wanted to stop by. They've just begun doing some digging. And one of the key questions for them is if there's a synagogue in this little place where we're researching and studying, then we'll know that it's a town big enough and things would really start to make sense that it may be this ancient city of Beit Saida. And so he takes us there, and our team's kind of listening to him explain some of the stuff that's going on. And I told him earlier that I was really hoping to get my hands dirty and get to dig in a little bit and help him find some things. And we'd been joking through the whole trip about, I think I found the rock that David used to kill Goliath. Not really, but just that sort of thing. And he's sharing, some of the stuff and reasons why he thinks this might be this city. And Tara Banks, who's with us up here as well, she stops me. We're kind of exploring around the site, and she goes, "What is that rock over there? Did you see that?" And so I walked over, and there's this big stone that on the backside it just looks like rubble, but on the front side there was this etching of a lion on it. And so I'm like, "Oh, that's interesting. Big old stone." And so the guide finishes his deal, and he says, "Hey, anybody have any questions?" And I hadn't listened to a word that he had said to that point, but I said, "I do have a question. What is this lion over here?" And so he's like, "What are you talking about? What lion?" And so he comes over, and there's an archaeologist that was with us, and they come over, and they immediately begin to freak out. They're like, "Oh my gosh, this is amazing." And so we begin to kind of dig it out and end up flipping it over to where you could see it. And I want to show you a picture of this stone. So there it is, a big old stone with an etching of a lion. And what they told us, first of all, is that normally in excavations, you would find a piece like this in hundreds of pieces, and they'd have to kind of piece it together to figure out what it might be. But what they found out is they began to uncover it. The next day, the head archaeologist for this entire site came, and they took a crane and took it to some place where they're going to study it. But it will probably be in a museum one day because it's dated back to the 5th, 6th century AD, and it would have been in the wall of a synagogue in that time period. So literally, Tara Banks discovered a synagogue, ultimately that's probably going to lead us. Pretty cool. So she's with us, and but here's what God spoke to me, kind of as lots of great moments, but as we moved on from that into the rest of our trip, I continued to hear him kind of speak, and it's something I want to encourage you with, even as we've gathered today for worship. I've been following God now for 20 years. In December is when I committed my life to Christ, and I'm 38 years old, so more years following God than I had not following God, and I've been in ministry now for quite a bit of time as well, and it's tempting when you're in church for a while to just start to go through the motions and start to kind of think that maybe you've got God figured out and you've got the spiritual stuff figured out, and as we left that site, I feel like God spoke to me, and he said, "Hey, this rock has been in this land for 1,600 years, and nobody's known a thing about it. Who knows how many people have walked around this place and have seen it, but just like this was a discovery waiting to happen, there's so much more about me that you don't even know. That if you'll keep pursuing, if you'll keep seeking, I want to uncover and I want to reveal so many more things to you." And that's what I'm praying that God's going to do during our time together today. Like I said, we're finishing this series, or we're in the middle of the series, and as we were planning it, I met with the worship team, and we were kind of talking about some different ideas. And one of the things that we knew we wanted to do is we wanted to provide a panel of voices to talk about their perspective of worship. And so this weekend's gonna be a little bit different than anything we've ever done at Seacoast. We've got 5 panelists that are with me, and the joke goes that there's 3 worship leaders, a researcher, and an assistant walk into a bar, and I'm just kidding, that's not actually what we're doing. But we've given them 5 minutes each to share, and that they're answering the question, why I worship. And here's what I'm hoping for you, because this is going to be a little bit different than what we would normally do. And what I want you to do is don't try to remember everything that everybody says, but I'm believing that God's going to speak through maybe one of them or 2 of them or 2 or 3 things that God might speak into your heart this weekend as it relates to worship. And that even by the end of our time together, you would be able to answer why I worship, that you would have some background. You're not just coming and singing songs, but there's something behind that would lead you into why you worship. And so I'll introduce our panelists real quick. We've got Tara Banks, archaeologist / worship leader, and she oversees worship for all of our campuses. We've got Jack Hoy, who is researcher, communications guy. Most of the good things that Dad says here, Jack probably fed him those lines, but he's been a part of our team for a long time. We've got Brandon Lake, who Brandon is also one of our worship pastors here at this campus, but then also Central Support. If you're at a campus, you've probably seen him from time to time. We've got Lynn Stroy, who is our administrative assistant here for the Mount Pleasant campus. She helps Josh Walters and helps kind of make the engines run here at the Mount Pleasant campus, and just has an incredible word from God. And then we've got Nate Davis, who is the Mount Pleasant campus worship pastor. And again, all of them have a unique perspective. And we've sought them out because they've got something unique to share about why I worship. And so they're going to each talk for 5 minutes. Here's the deal. This isn't their day job. They don't do this all the time. Most of them have other roles within the church. And so what I want you to do, they're going to do a great job, but I want you to lean in when they say something and you think, I wonder if that was supposed to be funny. Just laugh. Act like it was. They say something profound, cheer them on. Give them some amens and attaboys, but I'm really excited for you. I'm really excited for them. So would you give it up for our worship panel, and Tara Banks, take it away.
Good morning. Good morning. Hey, they're letting me go first because I'm totally jet lagged, and that way it'll give them time to clean it up, as we finish up. Today I want to share with you why I worship. I worship because it's my job. No, actually, it is my job, but it's also your job. I worship because it was what I was created to do. And it's what you are created to do. So long before I was a part of the worship ministry here at Seacoast in a staff capacity, I knew that worship was going to be a foundational part of my life. I remember in the early 90s attending a worship conference and having some people come around me that I did not know, and they began to pray over me and call things out in my life that up until that point had just been secret conversations between me and the Lord. Things like pastor and anointed to worship and leader. And it caused a courage to rise up in me to actually live out those things that I already knew in my heart that I was created to do. And although I do sense His joy when I lead worship and have an opportunity to do that, I'm learning that there are other ways that I can worship and sense His presence that have nothing to do with this platform or lyrics or songs or worship at all. It's things like changing my baby's diapers and doing a load of laundry and teaching in a first grade classroom. Whatever is in my hand kind of moments. And I've been on this little journey of learning that it's all worship. And if I let Him use it, all the normal can express gratitude for a life that He's given me as I give it back to Him. I'm going to take you to the beginning at the creation account, to a little passage in Genesis that helped me understand worship and what it looks like off the platform, and understand why we all are created to worship. Genesis 2:7 says, "One day the eternal God scooped dirt out of the ground, sculpted it into the shape we call human, breathed the breath that gives life into the nostrils of the human, and the human became a living soul." Every day since that moment, man has been breathing back to God the breath He breathed in us. Our very living is meant to be an act of worship. We sing a song that says, "It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only." And the key word there is actually the word "so," because it means we have to respond. God breathed into us, and so our response is spending all the breaths after that very first, breathing back to the one who created it. Romans 12:1 in the Message says, "So here's what I want you to do, God helping you. Take your everyday, ordinary life, your sleeping, eating, going to work, and walking around life, and place it before God as an offering. There is no greater way that we can glorify the Lord, which is just really a fancy way of saying making him bigger, than to do the very thing that he created us to do, which is to worship him with our lives. And in doing so, we're showing a world who needs him so desperately what he looks like when we choose to obey him in the way that we were created, which is to worship, to breathe back. 1 Corinthians 12, Paul talks about how the physical body works and how that really compares to us as believers, that just as a physical body needs an eye and a hand and an ear, and we can't all be a body full of elbows, that the body of Christ also operates in the same way. And it needs all the parts to fulfill God's kingdom here on earth. Verse 18 says, this is where God comes in. God has meticulously put this body together, and he places each part to perform the exact function that he wanted. There's 8 billion people on earth, and he sees your heart 8 billion different ways. Your specific arrangement of gifts and talents and expression of them, not to mention your DNA, is completely unique to you on this planet at this time. No one can worship and make God bigger like you can. And no one can worship and make God bigger for you. Only you can worship God the way you can. So according to verse 18, if you don't use those gifts that he's given you, it's almost as if there's a little gap that's in the kingdom where those gifts should be expressed. It's his breath in my lungs, and it's my job to breathe it back to him in only the way that I can. Backing up, verse 7 says that each believer has received a gift that manifests the Spirit's power and presence, and that gift is given for the good of the whole community. It's actually our responsibility, as well as a kingdom need, for us to operate and utilize all of our gifts for the kingdom, not to benefit ourselves, but to benefit one another. So if that's the case, we have absolutely no reason to compare ourselves to each other. Isn't that incredible? Isn't that liberating? All we have to do is breathe our lives back as worship in only the way that we can and have been created to. It is the ultimate you be you in the best way possible. So practically, what does that look like? In your work, you are created to worship with each creative idea or plan. Students, you are created to worship as you learn and study. Parents, you are created to worship as you guide your children and your family. Seacoast, you were created to worship right here as we gather with a holy roar that shows the world we still have breath. So let's join with those who for thousands of years have breathed back their lives, seen and unseen, in a grateful response to their Creator, and fulfill our purpose to worship. It's his breath in our lungs. How are you going to breathe it back?
All right.